Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Discussing a Murderer, Season 2, Episode 47, Series Finale. It's kind of surreal. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to make it through the whole episode without some sort of consolation from my panel members. We're going to need everybody's going to need to back me up today. But let's get to the panel. We'll introduce everybody one last time. We'll start at the top and welcome Big Jeff. Welcome back, Big Jeff. Nice to see you and glad to have you here and thank you.
Well, Jeff, thank you. As we were talking before the show, I kind of reminisced on how many states I was in as I did this podcast from. And so, everybody knows I'm from Massachusetts, but I also did some episodes from Maryland, Virginia, Utah, and I think that might be it. But that's enough. I've been all over. I've kind of committed to this, and really glad I did it. And what did we say? We've been doing it for a year and a half. You said now. That's
That's
over the
right.
top. And it was,
You're,
it's been good, and it just goes to show you as you go through this series that depicts the story of Stephen Avery and Teresa Hallbach. Um, you know, there is just a lot of stuff to be understood and parsed. And if you really want to get at the answers, it really is important to dig as deeply as we did in this series. And I'd like to thank all my fellow panelists for putting up with. And I love all you guys, so thank you very much. On to the next.
well, thank you, Big Jeff. I appreciate that. I just did want to say it's a good thing that I'm actually not paying you for this podcast. Otherwise, I think you'd have to file a tax return in every one of those states that you contributed to. So
No,
let's
with
use
your
that as
millions of viewers, you must be able to buy a yacht, and you'd have to pay the taxes on that.
Oh, Big Jeff, thank you so much. We'll be looking forward to your extended wrap up comments after we watch the last of the series. We'll move on down to Kel and welcome Kel back for the last time. Kel, welcome back. It's great having you here and good morning. And thank you.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning to everyone. Yes, last one. Bittersweet. I think that we're all ready for the end terms of like the wrap ups and moving on to the next. But it's a sad moment when we kind of close it up. Yeah, I don't really have much to say in terms of the opening. Big Jeff always beats everyone to it so perfectly. But yeah, thank you to everyone that always joins us, and let's get it going.
Well, let's get it going. Dr. Silkman, good morning to you and thank you for your contributions throughout the series. Thank you.
Well, I must admit, I can't believe that we're ending the episodes here. It really is surreal. And like I said, I think we've all been blessed with the panel members. And I personally want to thank you, Jeff, for putting this on and for getting us all together. The discussions have been vast, varied, controversial, and it goes to show, I think, the depth of the panelists that you have here, their knowledge and their wisdom. Now, the thing is, we don't all agree. We're not all sheep. We do speak our minds, and that's been great. The discussions have been phenomenal. And I must admit, I'm going to really miss Big Jeff's summations. I think what you need to do, Jeff, is do a special podcast and just contain Big Jeff's final summations, and you get a really good perspective on what we've achieved here. And again, guys, I'd like to say a big thank you to yourself, Jeff, for putting this on. I'd like to say a big congratulations to all our panel members here. I'm honored and blessed to be in such company of such great thinkers and dedicated and hard workers. And of course, we mustn't forget, while we're doing this, of course, for the memory of Teresa, and also to seek justice for both Brendan and Stephen. And finally, of course, for the wonderful people in chat who've come and supported you, your channel, and us. Glad to be part of the team. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Silkman. You know, you say that you really love Big Jeff summations, but I think you're giving him a run for his money on that one. That was some great introductory comments. Thank you again, and
Thank
we
you,
will
Jeff.
move. We will move right on to Jack. Last but not least, Jack. Last episode. Glad to have you here, buddy. You know, you came in when Dr. Silkman was out, and we kept you. We wouldn't let you leave after that. Once you got in, we didn't let you. We made you stick around, and we're not going to let go of you. It's so easy. But if you, yeah, welcome and thank you, Jack. Thank you again.
Oh, absolutely. I just did what I could. I try to bring what I do know and try to help and advocate for. I think what we've all felt for so many years now that this complete wrong it needs to be corrected. It needs to be fixed, and that's the really difficult side of advocacy because it's often grindingly slow. It's mind-bendingly slow at times. So, I was glad to help if I could. And hey, thanks for keeping me around. I do what I can. I've learned so much, and this again, it shows the vast amount of knowledge and the different perspectives that we all bring to the table. With that said, you guys have really covered pretty much everything. Thanks to the live audience, the live chat, for welcoming me to the panel as well. So, and thank you for trusting me enough to invite me. You've done a wonderful job.
Well, thank you, Jack, and thank you to all the panel members, and thank you to everybody in chat who's been on this journey since the beginning, and we've picked up along the way as well. But as I direct our attention back to the Netflix reel, I would have to just make a great point. Is there really a better place to start the last episode than with our friend Ken Kratz?
We could be sticking knitting needles in our eyes, having a lot more fun.
Yeah, we could just be striking we could be watching cars rust,
Alas, Miss Halbach is seen alive. The SUV, a clear path. So that's the timeline. That's the pathway, if you will, towards what happens to Miss Halbach.
Mr. Kratz in the opening and the closing talked about how credible Bobby Dassey was. There'd be no reason for him to lie, that the jury should believe Bobby Dassey because he's just this independent witness that's got no motive to lie. And so it was imperative that that CD be withheld because that CD showed the kind of demented, twisted, sadistic mind of somebody capable of committing a murder. So from their opening statement, the defense would have told the jury that they were going to hear from a state witness that most likely was the person who had killed Teresa Halbach, and they would have talked about his opportunity, motive, and that he was going to be lying to them. And then when he got on the stand, they would have confronted him and the jury would have seen these images. I mean, do we really think a jury would have listened to Bobby Dassey describe anything if they had seen what was on the computer and what he was doing, that he's searching for these images of torturing young women, many of whom look like Teresa Halbach. He's got pictures of women blindfolded, gagged, tied up, dismembered. And so he would have been attacked with all of that. He would have been totally discredited in his testimony that Teresa never left the property.
Well, I think she's framed our first question for us there a little bit, in that had this, well, what we know about the evidence, had this evidence been included, the process that goes into having this CD included. There is a lot to unpack there. Big Jeff, you got something? Start us off?
Yeah, I'd like to go, if you guys don't mind. I'm sure we have a lot to say on this. I certainly I believe about 80% of what she just said. I mean, there's certain things that she just said that we know just are simply not correct. But that being said, if we just get to the heart, and I made this comment on Reddit today for those of you who, if you're one of the 3 people that follows me on Reddit, and one of them is some OnlyFans girl, so and she's gone. But no, seriously, at the heart of this, right? Just look at the VLE from 50,000 feet. If Ken Kratz thought that the VLE was immaterial and it didn't matter one bit, he would have gave it to the defense. It's that simple, right? He would have given it over because it didn't matter, right? If it doesn't matter, if it doesn't hurt his case, he's going to give it over, and it's not going to matter. But the fact of the matter is, he kind of used the so-called gentleman's agreement, which was an agreement that the prosecution and the defense made together to try and shorten the trial by not having to call certain people as long as the prosecution and or defense would stipulate to certain facts. And Detective Veely was one of the people that was stipulated not to testify because the defense just stipulated that that search was done and that there was nothing found, and so they didn't need to hear from him at all. And therefore the VLE was never entered into evidence, and it was not actually ever provided as discovery to the defense. Now, if the VLE had no material value to the case, there'd be no problem in turning it over to the defense. The reason why he didn't do it, because he felt that somehow this took away from his case. And if that's not the heart of Denny, I don't know what is. That you can argue whether or not it's exculpatory or not, but the fact of the matter is he didn't do it, and there's no good reason to not do it, except for the fact that it hurt his case. And there you have it. And now you have to go into, well, how would it have hurt his case? Because undeniably, you cannot tell. I'm not going to believe that, no matter what you guys tell me. I'm not going to believe that he didn't think it was going to hurt his case, and that's why he withheld it. That is obviously why he withheld it. So therefore, how, right? And some of the stuff that Kathleen Zelder, I mean, she certainly believes it at the time. She hadn't had the opportunity to uncover some of the things that we've uncovered, these things we've even sent to her. When I say we, I mean Kelly. I do believe that it possibly could have. I'm not saying definitely, but it possibly could have made an impact on the jury, if indeed it could have been shown that some of those images were, researched by him on the morning. First of all, when he said he was asleep all the way until 2 o'clock, but we find out all of a sudden he's doing some porn searches when he's supposed to be sleeping. That could impugn his testimony some. Would that make a difference? I don't know, but it was worried Ken Kratz enough that he buried the Veely CD. And that is, now we can move on to the next panelist.
Well, I think they're really good points that you raised there, Big Jeff. A common element that we see here is the defense having access to the material, for example, the Valley CD, and actually trusting in the words of what Ken Kratz has told them, that the CD, the Veely CD, had nothing of evidentiary value to it. And if you read the documents, and we certainly have gone through them, Ken Kratz is basically blaming the defense for not merely asking to get access to a program in order to open up the contents, right? Now, we have debated at great length, and Kelly has presented a lot of very important information regarding the porn searches, who did the porn searches, what time it was done, etc., etc. However, one must understand that from the perspective of a jurist sitting in the jury and listening and seeing that material being presented during a trial, in my opinion, it would have had a drastic consequence, potentially a drastic consequence to the integrity of Bobby Dassey. Now, I'm not saying that Bobby Dassey has done anything nefarious. I actually don't believe he has. But remember, we're dealing with lawyers, we're dealing with attorneys, and their aim, Strang and Buting, and now Kathleen Zellner, their aim is to seek the freedom of Stephen Avery, right? And the only way you're going to do that is to put elements of doubt in the minds of the jury. Now, and Jack 61 will back me up on this. Mark Wiegert was interviewed, and it was part of a column in a newspaper as part of a search warrant on Stephen Avery. And in that statement was, we expect to find the following material on Stephen Avery's computer, right, Jack 61? And it included, yep, Jack 61.
Yeah, that is correct. This, I don't remember exactly what day that this appeared in the paper, but there's definitely an article.
Yep. So essentially, Mark Wiegert was saying, we expect to find images of pornography, torture, rape, you name it. Now, that's fair enough, right? But what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And Ken Kratz and Tom Fassbender knew. Now, you can argue it, and I'm sure Kelly will. You can argue the fact that, okay, if the state had nothing to hide, hand over the CD, hand over the report, hand over the contents. Don't make it a game for the defense to try and work out how to decrypt and how to uncode and how to open up the document. And I think we all know that had that material been on Stephen's computer, he would have been hung, quartered, and drawn. No question about it, whether it was intentional, unintentional, etc., etc. But there was a problem for the state, and that is their star witness, and he is a star witness because the words that Bobby said against his uncle, even if there was no nefarious intentions, had a dramatic effect on the jury and, of course, the judge, right? That the last person to see her alive, Bobby Dassey saw her walking towards Stephen's trailer. So we all know what that means, right? But however, because this material, now remember, at the time, not now in 2023, where we've got hindsight, back then when the trial was on, that was a lot of incriminating information. Whether it was Bobby looking at this material, whether it was somebody else in the household looking at the material, the Dassey computer still contained exactly what Mark Wiegert was intending or expecting to find on Stephen's computer. So, in essence, that material was damaging, right? Potentially damaging. And if you somehow damage the integrity of the star witness, because remember all the trouble that happened when Bobby Dassey mentioned the conversation with Mike Osmondson, right? And the defense are going, who are you talking about, right? So imagine if the defense was able to call up Veely on the stand and present some of the images that were searched. Now, I agree. Any searches done after October the 31st, it's irrelevant. But it's the lead up to October 31st. Now, if Bobby Dassey is saying, hey, look, I never heard the ring, the call from Teresa Horbach when she phoned up the residence, that's one thing. But Bobby said he was asleep. He can't hear anything. And the computer activity demonstrated that he was lying. He actually was awake, right? Now, I'm not talking about the pros and cons of searching for adult material. I'm talking about the fact that he had lied And even Ken Kratz during an interview said, so what if Bobby Dassey lied? Well, when you put all that in front of a jury and a judge, they're starting to think, what else has he lied about, right? So that's the only point I'm trying to make. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, we can rip it apart. But back then, that I believe it would have been very, very powerful material for a judge and jury to hear and see. Thank you.
Kel, did you want to go next? Please.
All I was going to say is I support and I agree with everything you guys just said. In hindsight, it's hard to look at it now and then, because what we know now, and then we got to remind ourselves that back then it's a different story. Completely agree. 110% agree with what Big Jeff was saying in terms of the motive for Ken Kratz. His motive of that whole fuckery with the valet CD was purely strategic to tie the hands of the defense so they lost the Denny argument because of having the ability to then be able to point to other people. They wanted to make sure that Dean and Jerry were in the most tightest spot in terms of the defense that they could get them. And they did. So much so that they ended up having the only people that they could point fingers at was law enforcement. And we have all in part of this journey as a panel members and the chat, watch that part where Dean makes that huge statement about no normal or person defense team with their head screwed on would ever want to go up and have their defense saying law enforcement were responsible for any kind of planning scenario. It's automatic, like a lose. So they knew how tough it was going to be based on what they were given. The only things that I push back into the back then is I think we all fairly have agreed throughout this podcast that it's been identified and recognized that the judges in both the boys' trial, or my apology, gentlemen's trial, sometimes appeared a little bit more favorable to the state. And I brought this up yesterday on the live that we did on Jeff Jones' channel. And that was to say that, when I went back and I started asking people in the community as a bit of an experiment, just to kind of get a feel, do you think that Judge Willis and Judge Fox made some pretty unfair decisions in terms of allowing certain evidence in discovery and then in the trial? And or do you think they both were individually quite balanced and was favorable to both of them, and both sides were getting kind of what they were asking for? And I'm going to say with confidence here, based on the question I asked and the results we got back, 100% of people who replied said that they felt that the state was winning more of the arguments than the defense in both sides. So the reason why I have to bring that up is because it's a parallel to, if we want to take it back to what could have happened back then. And what could have happened back then is, like Dr. Silkman said, certain things about that Dassey computer contents might have been admissible. The judge might have let it come in and go, but we'll only have it seen up until the 31st. We'll only focus on the things prior to, like Dr. Silkman said, the build up, which makes complete sense. But we're going to ignore anything past the crime because there's no relevance. That's understandable. The thing is, when you go back and you really do look at the Dassey computer content in terms of what was done prior and on the day, the question is now lying in technically Judge Ange's hands, and that is there any specific connection to the death of Teresa Halbach? Is there anything leading up that proves that someone in that household committed the crime and they were searching for certain things in the same perspective of what happened in the case? I know Kathleen's experts has said that's not the relevant part. they were trying to show in their expert opinion that it's based on someone that's getting more and more excessive in terms of the searching, which is also a very fair comparison. The problem is when they were doing their expert opinion, I fear that they weren't weighing in the other variables that have now come to light. So you can't make an assumption or opinion based on half a truth. And that makes the whole conclusion cloudy when it's not in its entirety. So in that perspective, I completely agree that it is, in hindsight, could it have affected the trial? I do, in a sense, believe that if third party was welcomed in, I don't actually just think Bobby would have been the only third party, Denny, that Dean and Strang would have went after. They had like 12 people on their list. He would have been one of them to just knock down from the perch, but I don't believe that they would have put all their eggs in their basket with Bobby either. This is why I think we've all repeated this a few times. We're in post-conviction. It's not about cause. It's not about reasonable doubt now. It's about new evidence. Back then, yes, if you could have raised reasonable doubt, the jury, you might have had them. And I agree with Big Jeff in that when he first started, he said he believes in 80% of what Kathleen just said. I agree too. 80% of what she said, it rings true, it makes sense, but there's that few things in it that I just, knowing what we know now, it's a little bit hard just to, push that over the line for me. But that's just my personal opinion. And lastly, this is a controversial kind of topic in a sense to how I bring this up, but I'm only bringing it up because it's a hindsight comment, but it is relevant to if we're going to look at it back then. And it's a question for you guys all to ponder on as well. It's why then, if the Dassey computer content isn't relevant like Ken Kratz made it to be, why didn't they use it against Brendan Dassey? And the reason why I say this is because of what I mentioned yesterday in the live. Brendan Dassey is now convicted of the, I'll call it rap at an E, and the unaliving of Teresa Halbach and the mutilation of a corpse. All these things, in a sense, is what Kathleen is trying to present was done. Now, I know that majority of that was done after Brendan was arrested, so that is in hindsight as well. But what my point is, we're talking about what was done in the build-up. We have now got timestamps of some of the searches that were done in 05. They were done on the weekends. The bulk of them were done on the 18th of September of 05, and that was on a Sunday. And the 18th of September on 05, which was on a Saturday. And the other timestamps we have are all done, majority of them are done in the afternoons around 4:15 p.m. when the boys would be home from school. So again, this is the issue I have. If we all agree that Judge Fox was allowing in certain favorable decisions on behalf of the state, who's to say that they wouldn't have just used it against Brendan and said, Your Honor, can we please introduce the Dassey computer against Brendan, because it's kind of going with what he is confessed to here, and we can kind of put him in front of it at certain times, and we can and we only cut it off to the day he's arrested. We don't see anything past up until that point. So I guess I'm going to end at that bit here, but I'm just going to say that, this is where we're at now. This is why Kathleen is exploring Denny, because if you could have gone back in time, could this have changed it? I personally am at 50-50 with that, because when we see what the judge was allowing in discovery and then the trial, I can't confidently say that I'm confident he would have seen the relevance in the Dassey computer either. He might have got it in front of him and said, no, I don't see anything here connecting to Teresa Halbach's death. I'm not allowing it in. So it's one of those things that we can assume, we can guess, but we just don't know. We literally have to wait for this motion in 2023 to play out to see what it means now, because back then we will never know.
Well, Ken Kratz
Yeah.
didn't agree with you, Cal. Ken Kratz was so worried about it, he buried it. So, and just what I don't think that it would have been a good idea for the prosecution to sort of haul out this piece of evidence, which was hidden from the defense in Brendan's trial. I think he had to weigh, he being Kratz, the overall prosecutor for the case, had to weigh the value of burying it or using it in both Stephen and Brendan's trial. I don't think he might have been able to use it in Stephen's and not Brendan's, but he couldn't have hid it from Stephen's defense and then all of a sudden pulled it out for Brendan. That would have been some immediate questions that this big piece of forensic analysis was not, even made available to Stephen's defense. That I think you'd have had a protest right away. And I think we do have to draw a distinction between Brady and Denny, because when you think about it, from all the things that Dr. Silkman said, which I agree with 100%. Ken Kratz was allowed to to make Bobby Dassey a star. What he was allowed to question a certain way. There was nothing, right? So if the VLACD is out, he has to handle Bobby, and he probably would have handled them much differently with kid gloves. So I do think there would be sort of the story that he would have had to have come out differently than it did, in trial, because that other evidence was available. And to me, when the prosecution's strategy has to deviate so much, then you have to say, okay, well, does this really rise to the level of Brady or not? Now, and you're right. In retrospect, the decision that has to be made, years and years later, right? We have more information about that, and we ask ourselves now, when you throw in the information that we know now, does it rise to the level of Brady? That's hard to say. But certainly, if the prosecution were forced to deviate from the manner in which it laid out the evidence to the jury, and squeaky clean, all of a sudden squeaky clean Bobby Dassey comes off a little bit, tarnished. Does that make a difference back then? It's a hard question to answer. So yeah, but my point to you is just don't fully dismiss Brady. There is this aspect of Brady, and they're not necessarily 100% linked. Now, Brady has that ruling has come and gone. As you said, the Court of Appeals ruled on that Brady, and I think their ruling was that if I think that the ruling had two parts. The first part of the ruling was that first the defense had the information, right, because they had the DVDs, right, they could have made repeated this forensic search themselves. So what was part of it, but it didn't. I think they also added in that even if they did have the VLACD, it still wouldn't have mattered. I think that was part of the ruling. So you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But that I'm just debating what I think is a point of fairness to Stephen and Brendan, which I'm sure you agree with. Not necessarily the fact that the court has already ruled on the on the Brady, so therefore that's come and gone, water under the bridge.
No, I agree. The Brady has always been there. Unfortunately, like you just said, it's something that my emotion, my opinion and my emotion about it doesn't outweigh what the courts have decided. So that's the hardest part. I agree that the Brady, I always thought her original motion was a slam dunk. The fact that didn't even get a hearing blew my mind. I honestly thought that Kathleen was playing checkers or chess and had just absolutely annihilated him. So I agree in terms of that, but my opinion clearly doesn't mean anything because I assumed what I thought it was. Unfortunately, the courts did not. So I completely agree in that perspective. And yes, you're right. They said that the Brady didn't meet because they had an opportunity to do their basically own research. They had the CDs, and I think in the Denny, in one of the motions that I read, they even said that they had an opportunity if they wanted to use the computer searches, and in terms of if they wanted to use it as Denny, they could have asked for like an extension, so they could have obtained a system that could have done all the expert kind of data entry stuff, like capturing it all themselves. So that was part of it. And just someone correct me if I'm wrong, because I am actually have had a mind fluffy here. It didn't Kathleen Zellner also use it as an ineffective counsel argument as well against Dean? Was that part of it? That because they didn't do their job or is that a totally different area? And that's when they're like, and I'm pretty sure if I remember, the Courts of Appeal bring that up and said, you can't keep doing that. You can't use the same argument for two different
Procedurally barred.
basically the same evidence. Yeah, you can't use the procedurally barred Brady side of it to now use it as an ineffective counsel, because your first argument was it was the prosecution's fault, but now in your second argument you're saying, well, okay, then it's the defense fault for not doing their job. So that's the parts that I'm like, in terms of the law, I'm not experienced in. I'm straightforward. I'm not a lawyer, but when you read the content, it's kind of like it goes back to that balance. My personal opinion doesn't outweigh, unfortunately, what the courts have decided. And I have to just get on with it because I can't keep getting stuck on it. Otherwise, if I had my way, we would have had a hearing, a retrial, and the boys would have been free years ago on her original motion. That would, again, to me, was a slam dunk.
I tend to agree with what Big Jeff said in his statement. Looking at this from 50,000 feet, this is the way I look at a lot of the information that was not shared at trial. And of course, as we know, that's really what matters here. What did they see in 2007? What was the defense allowed access to? And what was the jury not allowed to hear and see because the defense didn't have it or they failed to explore it? And this goes for Judge Willis too. I look at this CD, in connection with this, and I sent you guys a copy, the stipulation project that, of course, Ken Kratz presented, he presented it to Dean and Jerry. This was late December, early January when this all got going. And I'll just read, this is item R from that list. It says, computer analysis of Steve, Teresa's, and Brendan's computer, Mike Veely, of the Grand Street PD, analyzed the hard drives of these three and found nothing much of evidentiary value. We may wish to introduce the fact that they looked. This step eliminates Officer Veely as a witness. He certainly didn't want Veely on the stand. And that could have led into a number of different things. Now, I tend to agree overall, anything past October 31st is pretty much irrelevant. With the exception, there's an exception here. There were boulders created with Teresa, I think, and some other material that was created months after the fact. Now, that's circumstantial. Don't have a clue who did it. It doesn't matter. But I find it interesting that did occur. But nonetheless, let's get back to the CD. As I understand it, someone please correct me if I'm wrong about this, but when all this discovery dump, well, let's back up. This CD was created and handed over to Fassbender on May the 11th, 2006. And I'm sure he gives it to Kratz, and I'm sure Uyghur saw it and so forth and so on. Then all this stuff happens the next couple of days with Brendan and Kaczynski and O'Kelly, and then this interview happened on the 13th with Uyghur and Fassbender. That was that's a different story, but it's still really kind of connected at the hip here. But nonetheless, about a month later, Kratz files for the Denny. It was in June. I can't remember the exact date. I think it may have been around the 15th of 2000, June 15th, 2006. He files for this third-party elimination, the Denny thing. There was not a hearing for 7 months. The hearing didn't happen until January. Trial was in February. I've always really kind of wondered why that hearing wasn't held much sooner to give the defense a chance, at least to get that process done one way or the other. It was, if you guys remember, it was probably the only in-camera hearing that Judge Willis had. He said he had never done one in however long he'd been on the bench. Beyond that, December of 2006, this big discovery dump comes along. That CD was included in that, but Fassbender kept it. Now, I don't know if he chose to do this on his own. I really doubt it. I can't prove it, obviously, but I suspect that this was an arranged thing that because the Hallbox CD was handed over, computer analysis that they did. So why not the other ones as well? This looks really shady, a shady thing on Kratz's part. Certainly on Fassbender, because clearly it was kept. It was kept away from him. Could it have made a difference? I really don't know. I always try to think of in terms of what didn't the jury get to experience and understand that happened during the course of the investigation. There are other items that were kept away from the defense. It may even been kept away from the prosecution. I don't really know. And I'm specifically talking about this unfiled warrant with the blunt and bloody object that was found in the RAV that was reported and included in this warrant. No one knows anything. And talking about other things that were introduced that I really think that is really questionable, and that is the deviation that Culhane was allowed to get through as unsigned by her supervisor, which was supposed to happen. And, I just throw my hands up because this is the frustrating part about all this. Now, as far as Brady, I tend to look at it in more of a hard fashion, because now looking at it, years later after the fact, other events have happened and so forth. And personally, I think Kel's right. The motion that Casey wrote about it, I thought was just bulletproof. But I think that the COA went out of their way, really pretty far out of their way, to say, that really wouldn't have mattered. I don't think they can truly know that. We can't really know what Dean and Jerry would have done if they'd have had that CD. They may have not done a thing with it, but if they did look at it and isolated that day, the 31st, when this phone call came in from Teresa, I don't know I just don't know. Maybe. That's all I can say as far as I can go with it. But the fact is, they didn't have the opportunity. That's what really matters in our, criminal justice system, and that didn't happen. There are other aspects I'm not going to get into. You guys have really covered it pretty well. But again, I take this view that Big Jeff said first, right out of the gate. I look at it from 50,000 feet, and they didn't get it. And I think that's important. Thank you.
Just one more thing, because you made me think of it, Jack, with the Court of Appeals. They were kind of so afraid. I'm going to say afraid in quotes, because I don't know what other word to use, of the VLACD ruling, that they use some legal term, which means you can't use this as precedent. You remember? I can't remember what that legal. That's
not. Is it not per curiam? Is it no, not per curiam?
Whatever it is,
yeah.
It means you can't use this as precedent for other cases.
Correct. Yeah.
What?
I'll find that word.
I can guarantee you, Stephen Avery would never have been convicted if that evidence had come in that's on the CD. He would not have been convicted.
I'm not sure whether it was in the Court of Appeals document or Ken Kratz had made the statement himself that he essentially blamed the defense for believing him, right? For believing what Ken said. And you start to think, Ken, why are you playing these type of games, right? So in other words, he's put the ball back into the court of the defense by saying, well, it's your problem that you actually believe that I said that the Vlecd CD had nothing much of evidentiary value. Why did you take me on face value, right? A lot of the deals, a lot of the stipulations, a lot of the actual boundaries and parameters were all set in the pre-trial. So basically, the Stevens defense team essentially was working with one hand tied behind their back. And now this is amplified to a higher degree with what Kathleen Zorner has to deal with, because it's now become very elaborate legal arguments. It's got nothing to do with seeking the truth, seeking justice. It's basically using the law in order to block and obfuscate Kathleen Zorner at every possible turn. And, you know, when you look at, say, something like Ida Mafel, and all the shenanigans that went on with that, and also a lot of the bone, human cremains evidence, how it's all now become procedurally barred. One shakes their head and you think, wait a minute, here's someone who's doing independent scientific analysis, found gaping holes in the state's presentation of the facts, and now the Court of Appeals, the judge is saying, no, all this stuff is procedurally barred. And when you apply that to other cases, how is anybody else going to become exonerated, right? The bar has been set so high that, to me, the way I see it, and it's a consistent finding, is protection of the verdicts in hard as, right? They don't want to overturn this conviction. The state has a lot to lose, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's become, this is where it really becomes so unreasonable for a defendant when you have, you know, just because something is procedurally barred doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that they've said, well, you made a mistake procedurally in the process, so all your shit just gets thrown in the trash. And I think I think it's wrong. And I understand that, you know, they have to have procedure and so forth and that, but in this particular instance, it's not like she circumvented a million miles of red tape to do this. That's not what happened at all. This was I call it a minor thing, truly, with this mistake that she made in you know, ending the pro se and starting a new 97406. I shake my head as well, because is this truly, is this about truth, or is it just about procedure and process? Is it about just creating this narrative that Kratz and company created back in real time, leading up to this trial? And Doc pointed out a really good thing, that to understand everything, there's so much in the pretrial. This investigation, the so-called investigation, all the motions and replies and material from Judge Willis and so forth and so on. All this is a lead up to trial, all of it. And it just becomes theater after that. And now we've got mistakes in process and procedure that they say, oh, well, you know, we've spent all this money and you've got, you know, your experts that have clearly pointed out some real problems within the case itself from a scientific standpoint. And it just gets thrown away. I have a real problem there. Without a really good intention from the court that is really legally sound. Procedurally barred just sounds like it's just an excuse, a poor one at that.
The reason this ranks so highly on the scale of Brady violations is we will be able to show that this was deceptively withheld by the state. Kratz creates an index of discovery, which doesn't match anyone else's index of what's been turned over. But right at the end of it, he puts an entry that says Brendan Dassey's computer, 7 CDs. Well, a bunch of things wrong with that. It's not Brendan Dassey's computer, and there were never 7 CDs. There were 7 DVDs and a CD, and the CD is what has the analysis on it. The CD is what you can just pop in a computer and pull up and look at, and you don't have to have the in-case program like the DVDs required. But I believe what he was doing is he was trying to hide the fact that Fassbender still had the CD. It had never been turned over. So he's thinking that Buting and Strang and their paralegals, and you're in this big flurry getting ready for trial, you're going to look at that entry and think, oh, well, we must have that. By the way, it has to do with Brendan's computer. We're not going to get involved in looking at stuff on Brendan's computer. We've got to focus on the rest of the evidence that pertains to Stephen and the case. And so it's just so slippery the way that he did that.
Boom. What I was trying to say. They strategized all that so it was untouchable, that no one would want to use it, because you don't want to put it into the trial when your co-conspirator, technically, because it was Brendan, had confessed to these alleged same things that is allegedly on the computer that could have been, in a sense, used against him if they wanted to. And it's, to me, it was like, at this point, seeing this again and being reminded, it was a bluff from Ken, like, challenge me, I'll use it, but I'll use it against you. Come on now. And when I went back and did the timeline of the Dassey computer, this is why I always was very curious to why Dean and Jerry did stop pursuing it, because when you go back and you break down the timeline, Dean and Jerry were the ones that were requesting it before Ken even seized it, before the state took it on the 21st of April of 2006. It was Dean that was sending Ken Kratz emails asking them, where is the computer? Did you seize it? We want it. We have phone calls prior to that. There's like 3 or 4. I said it in one of our off lives that we did, and I broke all this down. And Stephen is telling everyone on the phone that his attorneys are wanting this computer because there is some really shady stuff on it, and there's going to be a lot of trouble from it. So they were leaning into this computer all the way back in February of 2006. And we know Ken Kratz has openly said, we were listening to all the phone calls. And then Dean sends him an email, I believe it was like the 5th of May, and asking him, where is this? No, my apology. It was the 10th of April, asking him, where is this computer? Ken Kratz sends back a email saying, we don't have it. We didn't take it. And then what happens after that is there's another phone call 4 days after that where Stephen again is on the call saying that his computers are trying to get this computer. And then on the 21st, several days later, the computer's finally seized from the state. So, and just for Jay Jacks, in terms of the Dassey computer and the Denny argument, he filed that on the 6th of May, I believe. And hang on, let me just double check. The 6th of June, my apology, is where, no, hang on. 9th of June, my apology, Ken files for third-party liability.
There you go.
Yeah. And that was actually, and there's a few things that happened prior to that, just so you know, really quickly. The 11th, let's have a look. I've got here, 21st of April, the Dassey computer is seized. The 11th of May of 2006, Fassbender receives the Dassey computer report. The 12th of May, the Dassey computer and the 12 CDRs are returned back to Barb Yonder. On the 13th of May, they interview Brendan Dassey regarding the computer content. Do you guys remember that they actually asked Brendan about what was on that computer a few days after they've seized it and they've got the report? And then on the 6th of June, Brad Dassey calls Fassbender and tells them about the whole clearing of the computer. 3 days after that, third-party liability gets submitted by Ken Kratz.
It's the first thing that Kratz does. And then this stipulation proposal was sent by Mr. Kratz on January 25th of 2007. The trial started in the early part of February 2007, so it couldn't be any closer to the trial date. So stipulations are pretrial agreements between each side about evidence that you both agree on, and so you don't need to bring witnesses in to testify. It's a way to streamline the trial. So in paragraph R, Mr. Kratz says, computer analysis of Steve, Teresa, and Brendan's computer. Of course, this is not Brendan's computer. Mike Vlecd of the Grand Chute Police Department analyzed the hard drives of these three and found nothing much of evidentiary value. This stip eliminates Officer Vlecd as a witness.
I mean, isn't this the point right here? Like, that's with a period, big period, exclamation point, what she's saying right now, guys.
Well, the thing is, if Vlecd was a witness, then he would have had to admit that he would have admitted that he, created the CD, and he would have found out we would have found out what was on it. So he was desperate, that the act of keeping the Vlecd CD itself out of the hands of the defense required the stipulation, any set of stipulations that would eliminate, Vlecd from getting on the stand, and that was the one. So yeah.
I mean, to me, the Vlecd CD was a Trojan horse, right? Open it at your own peril, right? You want to use it? Okay, use it. So is it damaging? Is it beneficial? You know what I mean? So it was one of those things that was not really tested, right? So we can argue it now in 2023, but in my opinion now, it's almost irrelevant, right? It's almost irrelevant now. It's the impact that it would have had back during the trial, right? And I still believe that it was a test. It was a test by Kratz. Okay, here it is. You want to delve deep into it, right? But I do agree with what everybody else has said. You didn't want Mike Vlecd on the stand, because once you had him on the stand, the defense would have questioned him extensively and made him break down the analysis of what was found, times, dates, etc., etc. And imagine if Mike Vlecd said, yeah, on October the 31st, when Teresa Horbach was going to come on the property or was on the property, etc., the following searches were done. Now, the searches could have been just mainstream pornography, nothing nefarious, but that's not the point. The point is you've now caught your star witness in a lie, right? And then it starts to ask greater questions. Okay, if he's lied here, what else has he lied? Did he actually hear the phone call? Did he play it back? Did he know that Teresa Horbach was coming on the property? Now, I'm not suggesting anything nefarious. I'm thinking about how the defense attorneys work, right? They're there to put an element of doubt. That element of doubt, as Big Jeff, Kelly, and Jack 61 has alluded to, was never tested.
Yeah, I think people who have listened to me, and I think Jack is right along with me on the things. I mean, you have to look at the larger scale impact that the decisions that are made by the Court of Appeals, et cetera, have on the legal system at large. and now, so if you look at, for example, in my opinion, and the decision that they made on the VLCD that it was not a Brady violation, what is that going to enable the next dirty prosecutor to do? You think he's going to think twice about, I got this piece, I got this guy, I don't like this guy, I think he's a dirty guy, I want to make him go away, and I want to strengthen my case. Should I, is this something that I can bury or not? Because this happened on the Avery case, and I know the Court of Appeal said that it's not, but it happened once, it can happen again. It wasn't stomped. It wasn't, this is Brady. You got to give everything. If you don't give it, it's Brady. New trial for this guy. Right? That's not what happened. What happened was, well, we made this special thing just for Stephen Avery. Well, they made it just for Stephen Avery. They might make it for this other guy too. So has this ruling made our legal system? Has it given me more confidence in the legal system, or has it shattered my confidence, or contributed to the shattering of my confidence in the legal system? And do I think that it essentially corrupted it for more? It's clearly the latter for me, right? The prosecutors got away with something here, and this ruling, this non-Brady ruling, or ruling that it wasn't Brady, in my mind, this is something that you should worry about being used against you.
Well, the VLCD, in my opinion, potentially could have hurt the state. I don't think if it helped the state, they would have put bells and whistles on it,
right?
And
Exactly.
They would have handed over the report, said, "Have a look what Brendan Dassey was doing." But they knew when they did the analysis, they would have worked out, well, Brendan was at school these particular times. It couldn't have been him. The searches were done when Bobby Dassey was likely by himself, right? Even if it was just a few searches. So in my opinion, they looked at it. They looked at it and I thought, no good can come out of this. No good can come out of this. It's not going to help our case. It's going to cause some doubt in the mind of the juries and potentially the judge, right? So hence, what they did was they sort of say, look, here you go. We've done our diligence. We've handed over the material. Oh, by the way, you need a special program in order to analyze it, right? And Fassbender deep sixed it for a long period of time, right? They never checked it. So in effect, the court can say now, it's your fault, buddy. You trusted Kratz. You had the material. You had the option to deep dive into it. And as Kelly pointed out, okay, so you needed a little bit more time, we would have granted more time for you. You didn't do it, your fault.
And you think this strengthens the judicial process?
No, not at all. But it goes to show the masterminds of pre-preparing a case. That's what it is. Tom Fallon, he's a genius. He's a guru. He knows whatever hurt your case, don't go there. Do not go there. Don't cloud your case. Don't make your case weaker. Make it stronger. So they dangled the carrot in front of the defense. The defense never took the bite. They thought, okay, if Ken Kratz says nothing of evidentiary value, we believe him.
I agree. I think that the whole Dassey computer content, the VLCD in regards to the whole thing, was just one aspect of what they were trying to, not show, because it, in a sense, it could have been damning for them because of the reasonable doubt back then and such and such. However, I'm looking at it as in the bigger picture. The bigger picture for me was they just were trying to eliminate any kind of third-party liability, and that was just part of that structure. They were trying to make the defense team the most weakest argument they could possibly give them. And if you remove all those aspects, Denny, the third-party liability, certain experts coming in, certain witnesses being able to testify, like what we just witnessed, Deb, the coroner, who was stricken, and that was a defense call, then you were left with what the defense ultimately did have. Their hands tied behind their back, and they were literally having to rely on just pointing the finger at all law enforcement, whether it was incompetency in terms of what they failed to do in the case, or we do know that they actually had to point the finger to the framing side of it as well. So in the bigger picture, the whole point is, in my opinion, the Dassey computer is just one aspect of what they were strategically trying to do, and that was just bring and not only bring down the defense, but be able to keep control of the entire case in their favor. And like Dr. Silkman said, it's actually really clever because they had the masterminding to put their thoughts together and go, right, let's really bring them down. Let's give them a little, see how much they take, and there's a certain amount of bluffing in there, like, you know, in terms of this whole, because I remember this was a part of the community for a while. People were like, oh, it's dogged that, Ken Kratz labeled it as Brendan Dassey's computer. I agree. It's cheeky as hell. But he wrote that to Dean. That was never in all the actual documents. Here's the irony. They kept it as the Dassey computer. They never crossed that line. They just used that wording towards the defense team to rattle them, to get them to kind of go, I'm not going there. So it's all part of the game. And unfortunately, and in a bit of a repeat, we hear most lawyers say they will never ask questions you don't know the answers to. And the Valley CD could have been one of those situations where if you get Valley on the CD, you don't know what questions the defense will ask, what window, what door will be open, and what avenue they'll take. And they weren't going to risk it.
Nothing much of evidentiary value. Yeah, for the state, there's nothing much, but there's something huge for the defense that he's kept from them. And of course, where the deception is in labeling it as Brendan's computer. It's not Brendan's computer. Brendan's the person using it, less than anyone in the family. But Kratz knew, it's very clever. He knew if he told them, oh, Brendan's computer, we did a forensic analysis, and oh, you guys are really lucky. There's nothing on there of evidentiary value. You're not going to say, wait a minute, we want to dive deeper into this and really start looking at what's been disclosed. So it was just they were completely duped. This isn't just an academic discussion. This is about depriving someone of their life, because being locked up, life without parole, in a little cage for the rest of your life, is just about as bad as it gets. And when you find out that you're there because the other side tricked and lied to your attorneys, it doesn't get much worse than that. It's hardly the prosecutor seeking justice.
Just quickly, I just thought I'd better mention it because, this is the end, and it's part of what Kathleen just addressed. So here's the irony in a sense. So we have, Kathleen has just, explained that Ken Kratz has kind of said, oh, there is no evidentiary here, like value in the content, that there's nothing in it. We've got you, you're lucky. Unfortunately, in a sense, we have to carry that on until the now as well. And I'll quickly tell you why. Because in 2021, when the courts of appeal were making their decision, they ruled on, obviously, in their terms, they cited law and they applied the law in their decisions. And then they would make some references to, okay, let's address it as the merit side as well. They actually make a point and it's like 0.65, page 65.25 in that motion side of it, the opinion. And they state that after they reviewed, and I'm going to say this very slowly, after they reviewed the Dassey computer, they too found there was nothing of an evidentiary hearing in terms of the content itself, in a sense that they believe that Kathleen is misrepresenting it. And they actually write the word, it's a misrepresentation from the defense as of right now. The state, when they made their reply in this latest motion, they attached that paragraph in their footnotes like 3 times for Judge Ange to keep reading, to reference back to that this has already been addressed by courts of appeal on the merit side, that the contents that Kathleen is trying to pull out of the, in terms of the defense argument, that it could be a motive, they're saying courts of appeal is saying she's misrepresenting it. It's got no connection whatsoever to this crime. Therefore, in a sense, it is of no evidentiary value to a Denny prong.
Right. Now, Kathleen Zellner, rightly or wrongly, is going after Bobby Dassey as a potential Denny suspect, right? So now the courts are trying to justify why the Vlecd CD or the contents of the CD is not a Denny prong. So we've got a very interesting situation here whereby Tom Sawinski, rightly or wrongly, said he saw 2 people pushing the RAV4 up Avery Road on the early morning of November the 5th, right? So how is if that statement is indeed true, if the observation by Tom Sawinski is indeed true, and Bobby Dassey and Santa, that we affectionately refer to the other person, are pushing the RAV4 onto the Avery property, and now the court's going to say, well, yeah, okay, but maybe Stephen got him to do it. It's all Stephen's fault. So now are they going to try and shoot down all the prongs of the Denny based on the fact that the Vlecd CD is now a moot point? Is that what the court's trying to do? So even though potentially you've got Bobby Dassey, please, I'm not saying Bobby did anything. I'm just recalling what Tom Sawinski stated, right? And also Bresh seeing the RAV4 as well. Yeah, there are problems, there are issues. So is the court now trying to get everything dismissed because one of the prongs has been knocked down, despite potentially Bobby Dassey having his hands on the victim's vehicle on the very same day that Pam Sturm discovers it? Is that what the court's trying to do, Kelly?
That's what the state's trying to get the court to do, right? It's a bit of a difference.
Well,
and yeah,
well,
I mean,
but see, the courts of appeal kind of already set the standard by that. If you go back and read it, because they addressed it on its merits of what the Dassey computer they claim that they went through. I'm actually in the background trying to get it up. They actually were they addressed it as in terms of, you gotta remember, Kathleen had already presented all the Dassey computer content before through Hunt, her expert. So they reviewed all that and they came back and said that there is a misunderstanding, that there is no representation of the crime, the direct crime of the images that you're trying to point to the crime itself. And this is why I'm saying, in terms of the Brady versus where we're at now, the Brady's gone. It's over. That's exactly what they're trying to do now, because the Brady is not an issue for them anymore. Kathleen's going in attacking the Denny, because you have to have all the 3 prongs. So if she doesn't, if Judge Ange, and let's even skip her, because let's just skip her.
Right. I agree.
Okay, let's just skip her in the terms of, I think in all fairness that Kathleen wrote that appeal for the courts of appeal. I think I think she's probably wrote it going, you know what, the chance of Ange even taking this seriously, it's going to be, it'll be a Christmas miracle. It's not impossible, but it is what it is. And I think she wrote it for the courts of appeal because she knows more than likely it's going to end up to them regardless. So when I think, so when she wrote it, she's writing it in terms of, you know, the Denny. And the Denny argument is you have to have all three prongs.
Yes.
She's trying to use the Denny content as motive. So this is why I've been stressing about the content itself, because we're past the Brady. That's gone. We have to focus on the now. And the now is that for the content, for the Dassey computer content to make it in, the judges, and I'm going to say judges because beyond Ange, have to believe that only Bobby did it, because it has to become his motive, no one else's. It has to be his motive. But if you lose that prong, the courts of appeal and the state especially, they echo it in their reply 100 fucking times. You cannot have a Denny argument without all three. It's never been a 2-point argument, a 1 point. You must qualify all three. So what the state is trying to do is trying to break that down and going, it isn't just Bobby. And if it isn't just Bobby, there goes your motive, because it has to be Bobby's motive. The direct connection for him, because you've got to have motive, direct connection, and opportunity. Judge Willis, I don't know if you guys remember this, but Judge Willis back in 2010, he already said that Bobby had 2 of them. Before Tom Skowinski, he said he most likely had direct connection and he most likely already had opportunity. He just did not have motive. And this is why we're reflecting now on, would this Dassey computer content had a reflection on back then, because would that have shown motive? And this is where it's unpredictable, because we don't know. With what we've seen now with the courts, they're saying what they've seen. No, there's no direct motive in it, because you can't, one, prove it's only Bobby's, and you can't, and what they're saying in terms of their opinion in their 2021 review, that it's being misrepresented, that what Kathleen's trying to say in that is not directly connected to the motive of committing the crime against Teresa Hallbuck. So when I was looking at all that, the Denny citations, and I was trying to understand it, it appears it shouldn't be that hard. You should be able to usually it's like the Dassey content should be the motive. The direct connection should have been, even before Tom Skowinski, should have been the fact that he was around in the property. He left, she left. There's that connecting circumstantial factor there. And clearly the opportunity. He admitted to seeing her. He admitted being in her location, and he was aware of her presence. In face value, that usually qualifies. In most cases, that's enough. But this is where, Dr. Silkman, you have eloquently said the bar has been raised higher in this case. Extremely high. This is not just a matter of being able to go, oh, it's just that simple. This is post-conviction, where you have to provide more than just circumstantial. It has to be new evidence to support all those 3 factors. And on top of that, she also has the new harder burden, because not only does she have to but just be able to provide those elements of the Denny, they're also now requesting that if you want to say that Bobby Dassey has motive to commit the crime of Teresa Hallbuck, your other argument is the framing aspect of it. So now you have to show us the motive why Bobby wanted to frame his uncle. And then it goes for the other prongs. You want to show the element of the prong of direct connection, and you're now doing it through Tom Skowinski. But then you have to provide that same bar of the direct connection point of framing. Prove it was him. An eyewitness, that again qualifies at best a hearing. That's why we're asking for a hearing. Put him on the stand, ask him what he saw, and that is in a nutshell what she's trying to achieve. But then there comes in the layers. And unfortunately, when I say that is, what in terms of layers does Ange have to rule in to consider that there's no gray area for that, and that will go against him in terms of his affidavit versus his emails. Is there any really inconsistencies that whatever? Then we have obviously the separate side of that, because she split it. Kathleen was very, very strategic in this, in my opinion, and very clever. She split it. So she's got two pending arguments going. The Denny, which is, you got to have all your three prongs, which the state are trying to rip down one of those prongs specifically. So much so it was motive, because they started their entire reply back with motive, because they know if you lose that prong, you've lost Denny. Now, I asked Travis in one of the lives, how does that work? Because in a sense, do they go hand in hand? Because if you lose Denny, how then could the Brady side of Tom Skowinski move forward without the Denny? Because if you have a hearing, let's just put this out there, as an opinion for people to think about. If she loses Denny and they just say, you don't meet all three prongs, I agree, the Denny's out. But I will grant you a hearing for the Denny, for the Brady on Tom Skowinski, because it is interesting that there was a call. I agree. This could have been followed up with. How would that work then if this witness got up on the stand, but now third-party liability has been ruled out? Can he then sit there and say, I saw Bobby Dassey, when the state would go, Your Honor, there is no third-party liability. He can't point to it being someone else. So that's why I said to Travis, how does that work? I always considered that the Denny would be, if there was a pyramid and then you would kind of work your way down, Denny needs to be achieved first before the Brady of the call would become relevant, because, what comes first? What would you need? Travis kind of thinks maybe it's the other way around, that you need the Brady to be achievable first. If you got the Brady in, then the Denny will follow, because like I said, you can't get a guy probably up there to accuse a third party if there is no third party liability in stake. So these are where we're at now. So yeah, sorry, Silkman, I can see you clearly want to chat, so go for it.
No. I agree. And like I said, what is intriguing is that it's become an intellectual argument between attorneys, and the letter of the law. So my fundamental issue here is, are they really after the truth, or are they trying to block Kathleen Zellner at all opportunities by using legal arguments, right? Kathleen Zellner is desperate to present her side of the story in front of a judge, jury, or whatever. The state are putting roadblocks and obfuscating her at every opportunity, because as you said, once it's in front of a judge, then you can bring forward all the legal arguments, right? So the question is Stephen and Brendan going to remain in prison until they die based on a technicality? As in, well, the Bailey CD's got no merit here. It's not a Denny prong, because you can't distinctively prove it was Bobby Dassey. It may have been, but we're going to present clever legal arguments that you can't bring forward the Bailey CD, which then goes back to what Ken Kratz originally did when he presented the information to the attorneys right at the get-go, right? Nothing of evidentiary value. It's Brendan Dassey's computer. So basically all we're doing is we're going around in a circle. And somehow that circle has to be cut. Otherwise, the boys are going to die in prison for potentially something that they never did, all based on legal argument. That's what I'm trying to bring forward here. At what point do we go, hey, common sense has to prevail here? Big Jeff.
Well, no, that's exactly where I was going, and it's not only true for the boys; it's true for probably other people as well who have already been through this and in the future. And that's my problem. It just think about how fundamentally broken the system is, and that one way to summarize the discussion that we just had is that a witness has come forward and says that they saw, and again, with all the caveats that Dr. Silkman had as well, that he saw Bobby Dassey pushing the RAV along with Santa onto the Avery salvage yard on the morning of November 5th, night of November 4th. Yeah, it was after, I guess it was 2 a.m, so it was the 5th. And that is such an incredible deviation from the narrative that the state had at trial, that it logically speaks to us that, oh my God, this is such a radically different piece of evidence. Stephen Avery, just logically speaking, and that we'll separate lawfully from logically. It seems to me that the evidence that put him away ought to be reconsidered in the light of this new evidence. But the problem that we're having is that even given this new evidence, there is no legal route, right? And that's what Kelly and Dr. Silkman were just talking about, is the legal route to this new trial, which at this point can only go through Denny. And if they destroy the prong of Denny, then all of a sudden this new piece of evidence makes no difference. But think about how broken that is, right? This totally changes the state's narrative. Unbelievable, right? Unbelievable change in narrative. The whole case has a completely different perspective if that RAV gets pushed on to the property by Bobby Dassey and somebody else. I'm not saying it happened, but we have a witness that needs to be heard. And there's just no route, without it's too much legal mumbo jumbo. Where's the common sense? And that's my whole problem. When the justice system gets lost in this legal mumbo jumbo, that's not only going to affect the boys, but it's a reduction and a corruption of the legal system, because when they want to make somebody go away, they can do it to them using the same crap. And keep them there, and that is just that's not what we want. That's how I want. That's not what I want here in America. I'm sure that's not what our Australian friends want either, to be done in their country. And it does not seem to be a lawful way through the logic, and that's problematic, extremely problematic.
Yeah, I kind of look at it, and this is a little crude, so you just have to forgive me, but I look at it as legal fuckery. Because that's what they've done. When you start out in an interrogation room with a defendant and you're allowed to lie, and then those lies they go beyond the interrogation room. A lot of this gets built on lies or perceived threat, real or not. And then you get these prosecutors, and even I'm sure defense lawyers too. I don't think necessarily that Dean and Jerry would compromise themselves and lie. I never detected that at any point in their defense of Stephen. I'm not saying that they're above that, but I never got the sense that that's what they're willing to do. I did get that sense from Kratz, and then later certainly Fallon, and then Gone to probably a lesser degree. But when you have to lie by omission or deception to convict someone, because the driver here wasn't the truth, and I always try to keep that in front of me. You want it to be, you think that's what it should be, but it wasn't. The driver was not the truth. The driver was a conviction in the lawsuits, re-jail Avery, and if Brendan gets screwed along the way, well, that's just collateral damage. Sorry, but that's just the way it works, guys. As Doc brought up this explanation and allowing these cremains to be basically given back to the family, allegedly. We don't know that for sure because it was an unsigned. The ledger was unsigned, and they called it inexplicable. I don't even think that's a real word. I guess maybe it is a real word, but as a legal term to justify an action by state authorities, I'm sorry, a real issue with that. Again, here we go with somewhat of it's actually a real deceptive maneuver to keep this case buried, to just continue to knock the pegs out from any defense that gets presented in Stephen's case. So I just wanted to add that in. And then moving forward, when KZ gets involved and she starts dealing with Fallon, he lies to her from day one. He is deceptive with her because he knows the contents of 8670 property tag 8675 have been annihilated and gone. They're gone. He knows that, but he doesn't talk that way to her. Oh yeah, we know we'll get this and we'll get that. This shit is gone, and he doesn't tell her. It takes this really strange coincidence thing with AAG Williams making this alleged phone call. He's supposed to be calling Fallon, but the dime drops, and he's actually talking to KZ somehow. What is that? What kind of maneuver is this? Was this a way of him saying, you know what, I really want off this case, so I'm really going to I'm going to drop a 5-pound weight on my foot so they'll throw me off. I'll take a slap on the wrist. Or was he kind of saying, hey, we don't really have this stuff. You might want to look into it. I don't know. But I think he wanted away from it once he found out that these cremains had been, gone, wherever the hell they're at. One can only hope that what they gave the hot box was truly what they felt like was Teresa's cremains. I just bury my head in my hand with a double face palm if they just gave away chicken bones and whatever the fuck that was collected. And we don't really know. I don't think they did that. I can't believe they would do that. I would hope not. Anyway, I just wanted to add that in there. This deceptive quality that is from the very beginning of this case. That's another aspect. It's kind of the elephant in the room.
You can't tell one lie without it getting uncovered. And their one lie snowballed into a whole bunch of other stuff. And I just don't think the county knows how to get out from under that. Good things are coming. The future is going to hold good things for Steve and Brendan. They're going to get out. They're going to live happy, healthy lives and put this all behind them. That's what they need. The whole family needs that.
No, because we know. So Kel was kind enough to post the section that of the Court of Appeals ruling. Now this was what 2017 when this was made, and the ruling came back. We're reading something from what is this 2022, Cal? That were 2021, right? So people had to wait 4 years for this ruling, and we kind of just discussed it extensively. But just so you guys are clear for the record, and hear the points that Kelly was making, here's how the Court of Appeals ruled on that particular thing. The VLECD. Regarding the use of this evidence for impeachment purposes, right? And this is Kathleen saying that this is Kathleen saying that the defense's possession of the VLECD could have been used to impeach Bobby's testimony. That's what they mean by impeachment. Regarding the use of this evidence for impeachment purposes, even accepting that the CD contains a timeline that impeaches Dassey's trial testimony, we are skeptical of this point. See note 25. And we'll go down and read note 25 in a second. Avery does not explain how impeaching Dassey about his use of the computer would have changed the outcome of the trial. And that's on the next thing that Kelly posted. At the most, the jury would have disbelieved Dassey's testimony that on the day Hallback last visited Avery property, he saw Hallback walk past the trailer. So really what they're saying is that they're not buying Kathleen's assertion that there would have been a full impeachment of Bobby Dassey's testimony. And I kind of agree with that, but we just don't know what questions that would have raised in the jury's mind. But further going back into the actual footnote on 25, I actually read off the text on the next page from the top. But going back to footnote 25, which they're saying why they're skeptical of the impeachment point. Although only tangentially relevant to our decision, we note that Avery's counsel misrepresented some key facts underlying this claim in the motion to the circuit court and briefing to this court. Avery asserts that only Dassey could have downloaded the images, created folders containing photographs of Hallback, and searched for key items relevant to the murder, right? And that's what they're asserting that Kathleen said in her, that quoting Kathleen's brief. He states that he, and I'm not sure what he means by he, I think they mean Kathleen, states that Dassey was the only individual at home when this computer activity took place, but references for support only the affidavit of his computer expert, who does not and cannot opine on Dassey's schedule, and a sheriff's department interview with Dassey containing none of this information. So yeah, this is kind of the stuff that Kelly discovered, that it's possible that other people could have done this, because Dassey might not even, Bobby Dassey might not even been around for some of the searches, and I think that's probably true based on Kelly's research. Avery also characterizes the pornographic images as quote, bearing a striking resemblance to Hallback and to the nature of the crime committed against her, end quote. As far as we can tell, we being the court, there is no support for this conclusion in the evidence on record. Now, meaning it might be true, but Kathleen hasn't offered any evidence to it. That Avery misrepresented the facts is immaterial to deciding his Brady and the ineffectiveness claims. So kind of there you have it. That's how they felt about the Brady violation, that it didn't rise to the level of possibly impacting the jury's decision. And oh, by the way, they kind of slapped Kathleen on the wrist because of what they which they're calling a misrepresentation, which to me is probably at best sort of maybe insufficiently pled, I think, is the state that the phraseology that the state used to use. But with that, I'll hand it back to you, Jeff.
I just want to quickly say thank you, Big Jeff, for reading that. The reason why I pointed that out and why it's so relevant now is because they see how they've already set the grounds. You got to remember the state attached this as their point of reference to Judge Ange and repeated that footnote like 3 times in their reply for her to keep going back and reading it. So they use it as basically a summary for the Brady and the ineffective counsel, but now they've added their own fuckery to it because now they're applying that opinion to the motion of Denny, because they're saying, hey, you've already reviewed it, that there is no resemblance in terms of Teresa and the crime, that there was the word, they've thrown down the word misrepresented. And when they said, because it goes a little bit more into detail when they're talking about the evidence that was provided, I think they're talking about the exhibits, because Kathleen has sent them all the exhibits in terms of Hunt and all the data of the images, and they're claiming that what they've seen in terms of those, they couldn't find that connecting factor. So that's what I've always, when people say, when I especially say that I'm repeating myself, this is the points that I reference to, because back then in 2021, we knew it was fuckery then, but it's now in the fuckery now as well, because they've brought that argument forward by highlighting it and attaching it to the current motion as well.
A much wider reach than just Wisconsin, and certainly wider than Manitowoc. So to me, it's about the bigger issue of how did this happen and how can we prevent it from occurring again in the future.
Innocent! Free Brendan! Free Stephen!
And they start holding prosecutors accountable for their actions, this will continue to happen. So not only Stephen, but to more children.
How's the boy?
Can you better? Yes, it would be.
He's going to be home soon.
Yes, he is going to be.
Yeah, next week the Supreme Court is going to be reviewing whether or not they're going to take Brendan Dassey's case. And man, I really hope they do, and I hope they really take their time and look through the evidence. And and see the truth.
Free Brendan! Free Stephen!
I want my son home and I want my brother home. My family did not do anything. Meaning Scott, my son Bobby, Brendan, Stephen. I know they didn't do nothing. They're all innocent. And the whole family's innocent. So I think they ought to let them out. And let us go on with our lives.
Today, you're right, we had sort of a couple more non-decisions. The court deciding not to take up two disputes that there had been some real thinking that the court might wade into.
The Supreme Court said it's not going to take the case of a young man. He was convicted in a brutal murder, and the only evidence against him was his own confession.
Today's Supreme Court decision not to hear Dassey's appeal means that lower court ruling will stand, as does his sentence of life in prison.
Justices did not say why they won't take the case. It was Dassey's last option for appeal.
Wisconsin's Attorney General saying he hopes Teresa Halbach's family can now find some comfort and closure with the court's decision.
Well, we knew it was coming, Big Jeff. It had to be there. Now, finally, after all of these years, after all these appeals, the Halbachs can finally get the justice. It's just stunning to continually hear. Well, at least they're good at staying on message. You know, I guess to give them kudos for that.
And as we've said 100 times already in on this podcast, the irksome thing is that what Brad Schimmel's trying to do is say, well, you know, it's a technicality. Brendan wants to get out on a technicality. His confession, you know, his confession was real, and they're trying to get out of it based on some technicality, right? The fact of the matter is, his confession was, when they say coerced, they don't mean that they, you know, beat a correct confession out of him. They mean that he said things that didn't happen, right? You know, Brad Schimmel's, I think, trying to conflate, you know, some technicality argument with the truth of what happened in that, you know, in this or a couple of times in those various interrogation rooms, and it's just not the case, and I'm sick of Schimmel.
So you know, you've got this weird situation whereby they're using the canine dogs, they're using the crime lab, they're using all these advanced techniques, and to them, they're going, fuck, nothing occurred in Stephen Avery's trailer. Nothing occurred in Stephen Avery's garage, despite item FL, which has now been debunked. But what you notice is that the investigators kept on spreading out the crime scene. It kept on going beyond the boundaries of Stephen Avery's trailer, bedroom, and garage, and even the Avery salvage yard. Kept on getting bigger. More things were being found on an expanded basis. So how in the hell can Brad Schimmel stand up and say, oh, you know, thank God now that the Halbach family can get closure, when their own reports and their own findings have expanded the crime scene so far, it almost goes into another county, right, guys? That's how ridiculous this entire case is.
Think about, just for a minute before we move forward, about the press conference, the March 2nd, 2006 press conference that Kratz gave. And he's talking about, you know, we now know that, you know, Avery's nephew helped him, blah, blah, blah. And we've got all this evidence, and we've got this and got that. And one of the reporters asked him about the evidence. I'm not talking about that right now. There was no evidence. He was lying. He didn't have anything, nothing at all. But he got on radio and TV, and basically he's testifying. This is the prosecutor. It's not like some random person off the street. This is the state prosecutor, and for him to do that, it carries weight, and it carried weight with the people in that region.
Vision.
Dear people in the world, thank you for listening to me. It means a lot to know there are many people who believe in me. I am innocent of the rape and murder of Teresa Halbach. My confession is false. It always has been. I thought I finally had a chance at life. I am going to keep fighting to go home. I still hope that someday the people in charge would realize they made a mistake. Until then, I am staying strong for myself, my mom, and my friends. Thank you for helping me stay strong. Sincerely, Brendan Dassey.
This story, the story of Stephen Avery's life, whether I win in court or just making known what happened to him if he doesn't survive, is something that I'm completely committed to doing because it is such a tragic story. So it's a difficult thing to know that we're so far down the road on it and that everything's mobilized against us, but it can be done. It still can be done because there's so much evidence. It's not just the jury that didn't hear the evidence in this case, it's the judges. They have yet to be given the true story of what happened to Teresa Halbach. They're just responding to what they have. They can't go out and investigate. They can't hire scientists. And so you can't fault them at this point. I still believe in the fundamental fairness of the courts if you give them the evidence. No one's done that yet. No one has done that. And that's why we're taking it up on appeal. We're trying to give them this evidence. And if they say, no, it isn't enough, or it's partial, then I'll go back and I'll get more. But I mean, it is what it is. He's been wrongfully convicted twice, and my job is to prove that.
He's been locked up for 17 years, 4 months, 1 week, and 4 days as of the date of this recording, which is also 6,342 days. I want to let everybody know that. This kid has been in jail longer than he was alive when he was jailed back in 2006.
The supporters don't know what to do because it's taken so long. When you're fighting for your innocence and you need the truth out, it takes time. You got to give the lawyer time so she can do a good job, so we can just throw it out, just 1, 2, 3, you're locked up, and then it takes forever to get out. You know, and that's the way it is. Hurry up and get in, and take your time on the way out. But then when you got the proof there, that's 1, 2, 3, you're out. Like the first time. They ran the DNA, and boom, I was out. So now we got to do the same thing on this.
As they say in Looney Tunes, that's all, folks. Can you believe it? You're still shocked. I think you guys are just sitting in your chairs, can't even move, can't talk, just don't even know what to say. I'm glad I caught that, so we can always show that thing at the end here, Jack. I know you love this one. The people who declined to the invitation for the documentary. I think it's a great screen to end on. We could probably have done that every episode, but wow. I feel like I've been sitting in this chair for a year and a half. I got to get up and go outside, guys. What an episode, though. To leave it on Stephen and his words and this thing, this arc that has been started that I call it, like the way he's folksy and the way he just gives it to us real. I've been pointing this out the whole series, and to end on that, I just thought that it worked so well. I just thought that it, and we got a little bit of hope from Kathleen Zellner there at the end, and so as far as documentary goes, I think great storytelling right here at the end. Great way to wrap things up, as they say. We checked in with a story with Brendan and Stephen, and end on the family, and end with Stephen getting the last word. So I'll open it up to comments there.
Hey, before we get into a lot of other comments, it would be interesting, really interesting to me, to take this list at the end of each episode, compile it, whatever, and compare that list to the people that are going to appear in convicting a murderer. Just saying.
Yep. The only point I really want to make is I reckon I've seen Mam 1 and Mam 2 probably 10 or 15 times. You know what? It still has the same impact. The feeling of desperation and hopelessness for the boys is palpable. You could feel it. You can see it. The resignation in Kathleen Zellner, the hopelessness, and yet, there's always a glimmer of hope because, like everyone here on this panel, and your fantastic idea, Jeff, to go through Mam 1 and Mam 2 again, and in a very critical manner. We did something very similar on Foul Play, but this is on another level because you've got all of us here very passionate, very knowledgeable, many years of experience, and it still has that devastating impact even today. All of us have done hundreds of podcasts, read hundreds of documents, and that's just like a big hammer on your head, just to show the reality. It's real. It's not a movie. It's real. And that's really the only thing I want to say. Is just very powerful, very impactful, and God bless those two that did it, because it opened up the eyes of the world to injustice, corruption. Otherwise, I'm in Australia. I would have not known anything about this particular case. And the important thing about it, it has parallels to hundreds of cases like this. Hundreds.
Thanks again, Big Jeff, for always leading the wrap-up comments. This was such a great part of the show, as Dr. Silkman is your #1 fan. I'm pretty sure. But we're all huge fans of you and your wrap up. So thanks again.
Well, how much time do I have?
Much
The
as you
episode's
need,
already supersized already.
as much as you need. Let her rip.
Well, I will say Dr. Silkman is slipping on his cheerleader outfit. Give him a second.
I'm not sure I want to see that. The pom poms. So you just can't forget that this story goes all the way back to 1985, right? This my good friend Kelly's often asked us, whose story is this, Stephen Avery's or Teresa Halbach's? And I'm not sure I know the answer to that yet, but Stephen Avery's, the impactful part of the story starts back in 1985 when Penny Bernstein is attacked. Might even start when when Stephen Avery runs Sandra Morris off the road and earns the ire of Tom Kasurek. And the wrongful conviction of 85, and it's best to sort of cage the 1985 conviction. Let's use the words of a known guilter, right? Michael Griesbach, who happened to be the assistant district attorney at the time of all of the stuff that were the Halbach stuff. He says in his book, or he has said at conferences, that what happened to Stephen Avery in 1985 shocks the conscience, right? This was no accident. This was no 1985. There's no police myopia. It shocks the conscience. He even goes on to say in his book that Dennis Vogel, the district attorney who convicted Avery, basically had no scruples, and based on what was found in the Stephen Avery file, Griesbach says Vogel knew he was prosecuting an innocent man. There's no mistake that happened to Avery, right? This was a deliberately wrongful conviction. Stephen is finally released based on the slimmest luck, right? One hair follicle left to test, and they find the DNA on it of the person who actually committed the rap of with an E of Penny Bernstein, who is Gregory Allen. And such begins the lawsuit, the civil lawsuit for $26 million. And the depositions, that we've covered, Foul Play's covered, I've been able to join Jack in a few of those readings, really highlight how poorly that case was going for the state. We've covered the drawings or the tracings of Jean Couché. We don't know where the picture of Avery came from. He was denied his constitutional right to a phone call when he was arrested. There was a lot of bad stuff. Things that you're not going to get an assistant district attorney to say this conviction shocked the conscience without a crap ton of his lawyer couldn't find him, without sort of a crap ton of bad goings on. And this was going very badly for the state. And boy, did they need a whopper to sort of make this thing disappear. And oh boy, did they get one. In the biggest plot twist of all times, on October 31st, a 25-year-old photographer named Teresa Halbach goes missing. And essentially, this whole case is born. Moira Demos, I think, is the one who said, "Boy, this is a real interesting case. This guy who gets exonerated is now on trial for murder," and she comes and wants to cover it, and that's how we have this two-part documentary that we saw here. And even at the beginning, people in town were still of the mind that the cops are kind of this is awful fishy that this happened to this person at this time. Why at this time in his life would he choose to do this? But they had some powerful forensic evidence, which I'll let another panelist speak about if he so chooses, And that, still wasn't really enough, that powerful forensic evidence to convince, to really have sort of the will of the people. That's when poor Brendan gets involved. And in the end, the beginning of March in 2006, he is in an interrogation room with two cops. He's mentally challenged, and basically they start feeding him all this stuff, and he eventually says, "Oh yeah, I did it." And he eventually says, "Oh yeah, this is the place where it happened," despite the fact that there's no forensic evidence in this place. No forensic evidence discovered as yet in any of the places. But after they get him after his confession, they go to places that they've already searches and uncover pieces of evidence that change the case, that are game changers, according to the prosecutor. And onward we go from there. I mean, that's essentially my overall summary is the beginnings of what happened and the start of the case as something that was meant to be a sort of a reclaiming of justice for Stephen, that turned into a horrific end and event for Teresa Halbach, for which Stephen was, accused. And people, even though people didn't believe it, when Brendan's false confession happened, all of a sudden that was the end for me. Even Stephen's good friend, Rolly Johnson, if you listen to jail calls, was, now that Brendan confessed, he was really very standoffish against Stephen. That really turned the tide and got people to stop thinking about 1985. But believe me, it all goes back to 1985. And again, just through the case, we've taken the time to analyze all the different, possibilities, all the different plot alternatives that there could have been, deep dives into the forensic evidence, all the evidence we have from the DNA and to the phone calls, and our deep discussion today about the how the Court of Appeals actually addressed the Denny motion that we saw. It's I'm not going to get into in my closing summary the details of the complex legal, because I think we did that ad nauseum in the podcast. I think we did it very well. But we stand in a very difficult position, and my final thought is that I completely agree with the doc's analysis that it's soul shattering to watch again, because that glimmer of hope, that was Kathleen Zellner, and that was again Kathleen Zellner at her finest, with her just her unmatched integrity, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars of her own money in this fight for for Stephen. We just know how all that, just in round one, right? She's on rounds 2 and 3 right now. We know what happens, right? And the Court of Appeals just smacks her down. I know how I feel about it. That and we talked about it extensively. That it was just she's in a legal conundrum, and we're almost at a point where the truth doesn't matter, and the introduction of common sense is simply not enough to save the boys right now. It's got to be more concrete than that. And that's kind of where we're at, and it's a little bit depressing, but that is where we're at. But nonetheless, we continue to research and we continue to fight, and it is important. I hope this podcast reaches a lot of people, because it's important to let people know the injustice of what happened here, starting in 1985. Continuing into 2023. Thank you. And we'll see what the next one is that we're on.
Thank you, Big Jeff, so much for those tremendously informative and really succinct wrap-up comments there. We'll head right over to Dr. Silkman, as I just think it's appropriate to address you next. Thank you, Dr. Silkman, and let's hear your summation.
Yeah, well, I mean, I thought some of the most incredible aspects of this whole podcast series was Big Jeff's summations. I really love his passion. Big Jeff, I've known Big Jeff for a long period of time, and he always wears his heart on his sleeve. And Big Jeff and I, we've done a lot of podcasts together, and we've had a lot of laughs and tears. And it was fantastic to have Big Jeff on the panel. His wisdom, his thoughts, his ideas are just so sincere. And I'm definitely a big fan of Big Jeff, and I really thank him so much. For me, I'm going to keep
It's mutual. It's mutual. I hate to interrupt you in your comments, but the feeling's mutual. Thank you.
No, not at all. Not at all. My comments are going to be very brief. To me, when I saw Man 1 and Man 2, I thought it was a joke. I thought it really was a group of actors doing some type of drama. I never thought that this was actually reality, because the whole case is incredibly crazy from start to finish. I'm only relatively new to this case. I spent about 4 approaching 5 years, and I'm still not at the bottom of the shenanigans. And I'm very fortunate to be part of the Foul Play team with some incredible people. And everyone on this panel has been in and out of the Foul Play team and bringing their wisdom and their comments. And it's been incredible. And what is amazing, the more you deep dive, the more shenanigans keep on coming up. And it's truly remarkable that what the court saw was only a small fraction of the whole picture, right? There's so much that has been left out. And it's rather ironical that Mr. Kratz says, oh, look at all the stuff that was left out of Man. Mate, the amount of stuff that was left out of the trial was phenomenal. And it's really incredible that you really have to approach this from many different aspects. Throw everything out the window. Throw everything out. Start again, right? Be prepared to crack eggs to make an omelette here, because you really have to have your eyes open to what really transpired. A horrible, horrible crime occurred to Teresa. Brutal. What happened to Teresa Halbach is akin to what happened to Christine Rudy. And what's incredible is the amazing contrast between the two murders in terms of an investigative angle. Hundreds of people rolled out to the Avery salvage yard to investigate what had happened to Teresa. Hardly anybody moved a muscle when it came to the murder of Christine Rudy. So what is the fundamental difference? And here's the question I ask myself. Big Jeff is correct. All the tentacles from 1985 come back in 2005. The same players, the same big players that were involved in putting Stephen away in prison for life or for 32 years or whatever it was in 1985, they came back to rear their ugly heads back in 2005. They were not prepared to admit that they were wrong when they put Stephen away for the terrible crime against Penny Bernstein. And the only way to circumvent what they did is to hit Stephen again. And the only way to do it, like Big Jeff has eloquently said, is to have a big whopper, right? And that is to pin a murder on Stephen, essentially to change the sympathy that Stephen had with his wrongful conviction and smash him on the head with this murder. Now, I often think, and I'm nearly finished, guys, I always think to myself, Stephen Avery had the chance to not only become a very wealthy person, and I don't believe the money had anything to do with it. He had the chance to become a multimillionaire and look after his mother, his father, his brothers, his sisters, his nephew, everyone. He could all make them all happy, wealthy. But he had the chance to seek justice against the motherfuckers that deliberately targeted him and put him in prison for something he never did. Now, I know I used a harsh word, But think about it. It destroyed him, his family, his life, everything. He could never go back. Never. Even if he had 100 million, his life was effectively destroyed. So think about this. He had a chance to seek justice for those people that put him in wrongfully, deliberately targeting him. Now, would he give up that chance to seek justice, to become wealthy, or would he just happen to throw all that out of the water and decide to brutally murder a 25-year-old photographer by the name of Teresa Halbach, who he has no axe to grind against? And to make matters worse, their own forensic team pointed out that nothing occurred in the bedroom, nothing occurred in the garage. All the forensic evidence pointed away from Stephen, away from Brendan, right? And as Kelly pointed out, a really important point, there's no test for planting, right? And when we distill it back down, we need to explain how that blood got in the RAV4. That's the biggest thing against Stephen. Everything else is very easily explained, right? Now, when you think about it, there's one common denominator from 1985, 2003, and 2005. That's one person, Cherie Cohen. Enough said. Thank you very much, guys. It's been a real pleasure to be on these podcasts. I've learned a lot. I've grown a lot. And we'll continue the good fight. We'll never give in. Thank you so much, guys. Pleasure.
Well, thank you, Dr. Silkman. I think that's my dirty little secret here, is that I think I learned more than anybody. And maybe that was the whole reason that I wanted to do this podcast, just for selfish reasons, just for me, so I could learn more. Okay, you caught me. You guys caught me. I've been outed. Thank you so much, Dr. Silkman, for those really thoughtful and on-point comments. Jack, we'll move over to you and say thanks again. And the floor is yours, my friend.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate it, and it's almost a privilege to be in really good company of passionate people about this case, bringing their own angle and views into it. Having these really adult, deep dive conversations of things that we've learned, which I'll start back at the beginning for me, and I'll just name off some highlight reels as we move forward in time. So back in late 2015, December, this thing hits and it explodes on Netflix. I jump onto Reddit immediately and get involved with a lot of people. It wasn't necessarily truthers and guilters at the moment, because quite honestly, many of us really weren't sure at all about Stephen. We didn't. I mean, I live basically across Lake Michigan from that area. I had no idea. I'd never heard of this case that I could recall. Anyway, as time moved forward and we began to get documentation, I really kind of felt just watching MAM 1 that Brendan got really a raw deal. I felt like that due process, he wasn't afforded due process. And I kind of felt that way kind of strongly about Stephen, but again, we just didn't know. We wanted more information. And so that crowdsourcing began. We began to get court documents, motions, various things that led us more deeper into what really happened. And it wasn't, as time has went on, we certainly have learned that this was a story that got told. This was theatrics at trial. That's what it was. Anyway, moving forward. Well, actually, I'm going to move backwards just a moment, because Jeff touched on it and Doc touched on it, and that's the depositions. As Avery filed that lawsuit in October of 2004, because there was a conclusion from the state that no, nothing happened bad in Manitowoc. Everything's A-OK. Now we have I'm not going to say every report, but because of the Coburn v. Netflix lawsuit, we have many of the actual reports that Amy Lehman and Ted Strauss did. And boy, oh boy, were they, some of these are really interesting to read because Peg Lottenschlager, they did this investigation of this case after Mark Rohr went to the DOJ and said, hey, because this got dumped in his lap. So he wanted an investigation. He wanted his, because he had really not much of anything to do with anything. But nonetheless, because of the result of this investigation, many interviews were reported by these DOJ officers, DCI officers. So during the depositions, Glenn and Kelly had these reports available. And, these people are trying to change their story. They're saying, well, that's not really what I said. I don't remember saying that. I didn't get a copy of the report. They're just on and on. So many I don't recalls, and just, it was nuts. And they were losing badly. Now, Big Jeff didn't mention it, but in June, and the state had to know about it, in June of 2006, a request for Gregory Allen's DNA was sent to the state of Wisconsin. They were going to come and take his DNA because of this cold case in 1991. And it was a match. He did it. Now, how sweaty do you think these people were in the summer of 2005? This is, 5 months prior, 4 months, maybe, or 5, whatever, before October 31st. And Teresa goes missing. They had, and an arrest warrant was written and prepared September of 2005 for Gregory Allen. If that had hit, I'm telling you, it would have exploded. I have no doubt. So these arms and tentacles had kept their hands. There's still no reports. No, I'm talking about media. So I think this was also another pressure that was held tightly guarded, but still, it had to absolutely flip them out moving forward into this investigation in the case. Brendan gets pulled into it. He gets absolutely screwed over. There's absolutely no doubt about that now. Stephen did too. But, all these things that we begin to get in connection with what the jury and the judge didn't get to see, the defense didn't get to see. There's so much. It's just mind blowing to me. And so from the result of that, there is absolutely, in my opinion, this is just an opinion, there's no way that jury could have ever come at the right decision, no matter what. There's absolutely no way. And it could have been boiled down to a lot of this is a little complicated, but it could have been boiled down and easily explained if the defense had a chance to get their hands on it. But that wasn't allowed. And this has such ramifications now, as we've talked about, in the now, right now. It's insane. Because if it didn't get presented at trial, fuck it, it didn't happen. This is the legal fuckery that I talk about that just absolutely burns me up. It's so polarizing for me. You got the guilters say, oh, they did it. And you got some guilters say, oh, well, I'm sure Stephen did, but I don't know about Brendan now. I don't know. Well, if you leave Brendan out, there's major pieces of evidence that do not come into Stephen's life at all. They use the results of what they gleaned from Brendan and use it against Stephen at his trial. How does that happen? That's, to me, more legal fuckery that they pulled and got away with. The press conference that Ken Kress did, it's not allowed. He knows it's not allowed. There's reasons that the prosecutors don't do it. It's prejudicial. I'm sorry. It's such a blow against a defendant. I don't care who they are. I don't know Stephen. I don't know Brendan. But it's so bad because they know it can affect the public in such a negative way. Going all along, moving forward, Brendan has a chance for release with Judge Duffin's 91-page excellent summary. He took a year, or right at a year, to go through everything that Now Ryder and Drizzen had presented to him. And he's like, you know what? This is terrible. Get this kid out or retry him within 90 days. And hell, it went all up in arms. All up in arms. The en banc, I'm not going to go through that again. The 3-panel judge in en banc, you guys know exactly how I feel about that. I think it's wrong on every level. I think it should have been the state having to appeal to the Supreme Court to get their case heard, and not the other way around. It's too one-sided for me. This pendulum has swung back to the state too far. I'm sorry, it's just how I see it. I'm not saying that every prisoner should be given all these exorbitant rights to be able to appeal their case. I don't believe that. But I do think that the pendulum has swung so far towards the state that it's damn near impossible once you're convicted, and especially in certain circumstances, you're not getting out. Okay, moving forward to in the now. Now we're waiting on another decision from Judge Angie. And, to date, basically, they've linked arms throughout the judicial in Wisconsin against Kathleen. They have. And that's how I see it, right, wrong, or indifferent. We have gotten a good education, I think, in how the courts actually work and how they process and do what they do. And this has become, in a large part, about procedure and process, which I don't agree with entirely. This throwing everything out, procedurally barred nonsense to me, especially when what she's presented, the scientific side of it is so nothing changes there. They're just saying, hey, you might be. They're not even saying you might be right. They're just saying you can't present it, and I think that's wrong. Because then it not becomes like I said earlier, it's not about the truth, which is what the criminal justice system, to me, that should always be the driver. If he did it, or if they did it, present it. If there's another story here, you gotta present that too. No matter the embarrassment that it could cost the state of Wisconsin, sorry, or any other state for that matter, it doesn't matter. It's got to be presented. So with that said, I'm going to end it there. Thank you, Jeff, for inviting me. And when Dr. Silkman had to be out for a while, Big Jeff and Cal, it's been a ride, man. I think we've all learned a lot. I think hopefully people that have listened have got a deeper understanding and interest in the cases of exactly what happened, of what we know. There's still a mountain of stuff we can't get. They won't let us have it. Getting an open records request now is worse. It's far worse than it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. It's insane what they've done. They basically have taken open records requests and stuck them on the back burner. I'm telling you, it's insane. So anyway, with that said, I'd like to end. Thanks to all the live chatters that have come in, all the great comments and questions and everything. I'm going to leave it there.
Well, thank you very much, Jack. I appreciate that, and your contribution. Couldn't do a better job at wrapping up those comments as well. My sentiments exactly, and that just leaves us with Kel. Kel, you have the responsibility and honor of leading us out of episode 47 of Discussing a Murderer, Part 2, series finale. No pressure.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff Jones. And firstly, I just want to thank everyone on the panel. Every week, you guys bring the best of this case in terms of knowledge, skill, and obviously, experience. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. When I reached out to you guys originally, when Jeff Jones reached out to me and pitched me this idea and said, help me find a panel, I already knew. It wasn't even a question. I just knew who needed to be there and why, because you guys are honestly amazing. Jeff Jones, obviously, I think I speak on behalf of everyone here. Thank you for all the hard work you put into us as well, for giving us the platform to voice our opinions, to go through the case, work as a team, and just, be able to deliver what we did. And I hope, regardless whether people heard the same stuff from us a few times that they already knew, or whether they found out new things throughout this process, it's just the journey itself was amazing to be along with everyone. That kind of takes me to the finale of the entire, thing that we built here. I don't even have to feel like I have to press on the 1985. I don't go there. It's not something that I really have explored. I know the baseline of it, and it's you gentlemen especially that have educated me in that. And you guys always sum it up perfectly. I am about the now. I think I've vocalized that very openly a few times, only for the fact is because we know the outcome and we were watching this in hindsight, and I kept that as my logical kind of conference the whole time, just know where I'm going, what I'm focusing on, and how, if anything, can make changes for the boys. Yeah, so I just wanted to bring that into it. I think one of you, I think it was Big Jeff that, my apology, you guys have all spoken, but one of you gentlemen kind of closed in on the whole, that last part of that episode was gut wrenching. And especially when we had Kathleen speak at the end, there was that hopelessness sense that she projected out that you felt. And she expressed that by saying, basically, I will not stop trying, but even if I don't achieve what we're looking for, I just want his story to be heard. And that's that moment where you kind of swallow that lump in your throat and go, shit, that's the reality of it. Even Kathleen knows there's that reality of it. As long as she keeps fighting, there's always hope, but we can't predict the unpredictable that could come in and change things. To everyone that always joins us in chats, the questions, thank you. You guys have been amazing. You keep us on our feet. And sometimes, the questions we get feel very baseline, but it's been an interesting ride because you take me back to the beginning and you get me going back and researching things that I've forgotten. And then something sparks a light inside me and I'm like, oh my God, it didn't feel, I never understood the significance or the importance of that part of the evidence back then because we didn't have, and I'm going to say it, the jigsaw piece that we do now, and we can start slowly putting it back together. Jeff Jones actually asked me privately yesterday, are you happy with what we achieved, and what was your outcome from this? And I said, I am very happy with what we achieved. I think our objective when we went into this was we were always trying to build something that we could always be referenced to anyone in this community, whether you're new, whether you've been here for 1 year, 2 years, or 5 from the beginning. Somewhere that everyone can go back and it's broken down. We have provided the most detail, the most facts. And yes, we do have an opinion. And sometimes they're of different, objectives and ideas. But that's the whole point of discussions, is to bring in all those different balances and make it work. And I think we did. But personally for me, what I learned, I think, from doing this was, along the way, there was certain little aspects that I kind of learned along the way. But what I learned more was just to respect life and respect that people have, different walks of life. And this, like Dr. Silkman just said, when you watch Make Your Murderer, it's not just a documentary, it's not just a movie, it's that reality of this is someone's life. Like this is the death of an innocent woman. And in a sense, I'm going to say it, in my opinion, this is the death of 3 lives, because 3 innocent lives got ruined in this process. And it's just a really, really sad story. But like every sad story, and just like the truth, something always comes out at the end. Let's just hope that it's in time, because that is what we're now fighting, time. I just want to thank you all again, and until next time, peace, everyone.
Well, thank you very much, Kel. I really appreciate those comments and your contribution all the way back to your blood experiments and all the fun that we've had throughout everything we've covered in the last year and a half and 2 seasons of a documentary. And so I'll let you have the last word on that, Kel. I just want to give a shout out to everybody in chat. You know, you are a thank you as well as you are the 5th panel member, right? Just thank you. Thank you for coming along with us. So for Jack and Dr. Silkman, for Kelly, and for Big Jeff, this is Jeff Jones saying this has been Discussing a Murderer.